All right, so picture this. I'm laying in bed, sound asleep. It is well after midnight when suddenly I wake up and in a horrible moment, I realize that I haven't even started the homework that's due the next morning. Anybody else ever been there before? Forgetting stuff is the absolute worst. Hey, welcome to The Big Idea, a time every week where we spend a few minutes trying to wrap our minds around one big idea about life and Jesus. And this week, we're talking about this idea of forgetfulness. I tend to be a really forgetful person. Now, I try to do stuff to protect myself from that. I try to set lots of reminders and write stuff on to-do lists because I don't want people to know that. But even with all the things that I do to try and remember, I still tend to forget. I'm constantly forgetting where I left my keys, where I left my phone. I forget about meetings I have. I forget that I'm supposed to hang out with certain people. If it's not on my calendar or it's not in my to-do list, it's just not going to happen. Now, I know I'm not the only one who struggles with this, who lives life forgetting stuff, because there's a whole industry designed around marketing to people who have trouble remembering. If you walk into any Target, any Walmart, there's like 6,000 pre-printed to-do lists where people have an opportunity to write down reminders to themselves. Open up an iPhone and there's a whole app dedicated to reminders. And if your app looks anything like mine, there's like 30 notifications still. It's a problem. They make things like tiles where you can attach it to a car key or something that you lose a lot, where you can just ring it and find it. For me, I use my watch all the time to find my phone because I just leave it places and I totally forget. There's this whole industry designed around helping people remember because we as people tend to be forgetful. There's one thing in our lives though that we tend to have trouble remembering, that we don't have a lot of things to remind ourselves about. And that thing is God. And now it may sound kind of funny to say that we tend to forget about God, but I think that if you just pause and think about your day, you'll realize that it's true. I mean, how often do we go through our days, get to the end, and then realize, man, I didn't think about God at all today. It's easy for us to forget God when we're not intentional to remember Him. And this has been true for as long as people have been trying to follow God. In fact, when God first called people to follow Him, one of the things He repeatedly reminded them was that they needed to make sure to remember Him. And so God instructed these people, hey, make sure you have reminders in your life. Make sure you have things in your life that you can see that will remind you of who I am. Write notes to yourself on the wall. Make sure you're talking with your friends about me. Make sure that you have things in your life that will remind you of who I am, because God knew that as people, we tend to forget. And that's especially true when we're disappointed. See, when life lets us down, when things don't go the way we want them to, it becomes really, really easy for us to just forget about God. And that's been happening for as long as people have been trying to follow God. You know, Jeremiah, our friend, the weeping prophet, when he wrote his letter to a disappointed people, a people who were dealing with life just letting them down, to tell them how to deal with things, he made sure to include how important it is to remember God. You see, Jeremiah, in the beginning of this letter, he was writing to these people who were supposed to remember God, and he told them, hey, you forgot God. And Jeremiah, he knew that before the people could do anything to deal with their disappointment, they had to first make sure that they remembered God. And so he encouraged them to find ways to remind themselves, just like I might set a reminder on my phone to make sure I pick up groceries on the way home, or I might put something on my to-do list to make sure that I send a text or call somebody I need to call. Jeremiah told the people to set reminders for them to remember God. And what I'm wondering this week is there something that you can do in your life to remind yourself to remember God? Maybe it's as simple as writing a note to yourself and sticking it on your mirror. Maybe it's setting a background on your phone. Maybe it's making sure that you have a friend that you can talk about Jesus with. Maybe it's as simple as you just making sure that you watch The Big Idea every week so that you have one moment where your mind gets called back to remember God. I don't know what kind of reminder you need to set in your life, but I know this. If I don't set reminders to remember other stuff in my life, there's no way it's going to happen. And I have a feeling that if you don't set a reminder to remember God, you're probably not going to remember Him either. And Jeremiah, our friend, the weeping prophet, wrote a letter to tell them that when they're disappointed, they needed to make sure to remember God. And that's what I want to make sure we hear today. When you're disappointed, remember God. That's the big idea.